I was in the room when we voted to throw Earth away. I want you to understand that before I tell you anything else, not because I'm proud of it, the opposite. I want you to know that I had a hand in it, that I raised my own arm in that chamber, that I am not telling you this story from some safe distance like a thing I only heard about. I was there. I voted. And for 9 years I told myself I'd voted correctly. So when I say watch closely, those 2 words, understand that they were said to me, to my face, by a woman who had every reason to scream and did not. Let me start at the beginning, or close to it. The conquered of settled worlds had stood for 9,000 years. 9,000. You have to sit with a number like that for a moment because humans never could. To them, 1,000 years was a stack of empires. To us, it was a long afternoon. We were old, the way mountains are old, and we had learned what mountains learn, that the way to last is to never move quickly, never feel too much, never let any single thing matter so completely that losing it would break you. There were 41 peoples in the conquered by then. My own kind, the Sephir, tall, slow, pale as river ice, 6 fingers to a hand and most of our talking done with them. The Dravani, who were built like the doors they guarded. The Kel, who spoke in clicks and counted everything. The Murren, the Asu, the soft-voiced Velith who tended the archives with me. 41 peoples who had each, at some point in their long histories, learned the same lesson and earned the same seat. And then there was Earth. They came to us late, barely 400 years a member, which to the conquered made them children, and not the kind of children you adore. The kind you watch from the corner of your eye. Because here is the thing about humans that none of the records ever managed to put into words, though many of us tried. They were fast. Not just their ships, though their ships unsettled the engineers, fast in a deeper way. They felt a thing one morning and acted on it that same afternoon. They loved each other to the point of stupidity and grieved each other to the point of ruin. They would die, actually die, willingly, gladly, for a stranger, for an idea, for a flag, for a song. We had species in the conquered who would not cross a room for their own broodkin. And here were these short-lived, hot-blooded, grief-shaped creatures who'd throw their whole single life onto a fire because someone they'd never met was cold. It frightened us. I'll be honest about that too. A thing that does not fear death cannot be reasoned with the way the rest of us reason. You cannot threaten it the way you threaten everyone else. And a conquered that had kept the peace for 9,000 years had done it mostly through threat. Through the slow certainty that nobody wanted to lose what they had. Humans were willing to lose everything. They said so out loud like it was a virtue. So we were afraid of them. We dressed it up in better words. We said they were volatile. We said they were destabilizing. We said their growth was imprudent and their reach premature. But underneath all the good words it was just fear, the oldest fear, the fear of the thing you cannot predict. The incident that finally did it, the thing the vote was built on, happened at a border station called Vay's Crossing. I'll tell it the way it was told to us, because I wasn't there for that part. There was a fire. A Kel freighter, a cargo hauler, took a reactor breach in dock. Now the conquered protocol for a reactor breach is very clear and very old. You seal the section. You vent it. You accept the loss of anyone trapped inside because the alternative is losing the station and everyone on it. It is a terrible math, but it is correct math, and we had done it 100 times across the centuries, and every time the families understood because they had been raised on the same math. There was a human salvage crew docked at the next berth, 6 of them. When the alarms went and the section started to seal, the Kel dockmaster gave the order to vent by the book, by the math, the right order. The humans broke the seal. They went into the venting section, into a fire that was already eating air, 6 of them with nothing but rebreathers and cutting tools, and they dragged out 9 Kel crew before the 3rd explosion. 3 of the 6 humans didn't come back out. They burned. For Kel they'd met that morning. For a math problem they refused to accept. And here is the part that broke the chamber when we heard it. The dockmaster, the Kel who'd given the venting order by the book, When the survivors were dragged past her, scorched and screaming and alive, she didn't thank the humans. She filed a complaint. She said they had violated protocol. She said they had risked the station. She said, and this is in the record, I read it 100 times, that their disregard for proper procedure endangered everyone and could not be tolerated in a civilized order. That was the document that got read aloud in the chamber, not the names of the 3 who burned, the complaint. And the Conquered nodded along. We nodded, because the dockmaster was right, you see, by the rules we had built over 9,000 years. The humans had broken protocol. They had risked the station. The fact that they'd also saved 9 lives, that wasn't the point. The point was that they couldn't be controlled. The point was that next time it might be a different choice, and we wouldn't be able to stop them, because you cannot stop a thing that isn't afraid. So a motion was raised, quietly, the way the worst things always are. That Earth and her peoples be removed from the conquered of settled worlds. That her membership be struck from the rolls. That a quarantine cordon be established at the edge of the Sol system and maintained indefinitely. That Earth be cast out, and the door closed and not reopened. Forever, the word was actually in the motion. I checked. Indefinitely in the legal text, but the speaker said forever when he read it aloud, and nobody corrected him, and the word hung in that chamber like smoke. The debate took 4 days. I won't pretend it was one-sided. The Velith spoke against it. They always do, the soft ones, the keepers of records. They remember too much to ever be comfortable closing a door. A Dravani general spoke against it, surprisingly, an old soldier with a voice like falling rock, and he said something I've never forgotten. He said, "We are not afraid of their weapons. We are afraid of their hearts, and a people who fears another's heart should look very carefully at its own." We didn't listen. I didn't listen. I told myself he was sentimental. Old soldiers get that way. On the 5th day, we voted, and the human envoy was given the floor to respond. Her name was Mara Navarro. I had seen her many times across those 4 years. She was not new, not a junior. She'd been Earth's voice in the Conquered almost from the start. She was not tall, even for a human. Dark hair going gray at the temple, though humans hide their age so badly that I could never tell if that meant she was old or just tired. She wore the same plain dark coat to every session. No marks of rank. No jewels. The other envoys dripped with their stations. She dressed like someone who had a long day ahead and intended to get through it. I had always found her hard to read, the way I found all of them hard to read, too much happening in those small mobile faces, too fast. But I'd respected her in the cool way you respect a competent thing. She argued well. She never raised her voice. When she lost a point, she conceded it cleanly and moved on, no grudge, no sulk. I'd thought if they were all like her, perhaps we wouldn't be afraid. When the vote closed and the result was read, and it was not close, I will tell you that now, it was not close at all. We cast them out by a margin that should shame me to my grave. When it was read, the speaker turned to her and granted Earth its final word. I expected rage. I had braced for it. We all had. There were security Dravani along the wall more than usual because everyone in that chamber believed, deep in the old fearful part of themselves, that this was the moment the humans would finally show what they really were. That she would scream. That she would threaten. That she would say, "You will regret this," and we would all nod grimly to each other afterward. See, we were right to fear them. She stood up. She was quiet for a long moment. She looked around the chamber, slowly, deliberately, the way you do when you want to remember something. She looked at each delegation in turn. When her eyes passed across the Sephir benches, I felt them land on me, just for an instant, and I swear to you across 9 years I have never forgotten the weight of that instant, though at the time I told myself it was nothing. Then she spoke, and her voice was not loud, it was almost gentle. She said, "You think you're closing a door." She let that sit. "You think you've made us small, that you've cut us off from the great river of the galaxy and left us to dry up in the dark. You did the math. We risk too much, we feel too much, We die too easily, so you've subtracted us from your sum, and you feel safer already. I can see it on the ones of you whose faces I've learned to read." A pause, she almost smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Here is what you don't understand and what you've never understood and what I think you're now going to have to learn the hard way." She folded her hands. "We did not come into your Concord to be kept. We came to see if you were worth knowing, and you've answered that." The speaker moved to cut her off. She raised one hand, not to threaten, just wait. And he waited. I don't know why, none of us knew why. There was something in it. "You've cast us out forever," she said. "Fine, we accept it. We won't fight the cordon. We won't fire a single shot. We will pack our envoys and go home, and you will close your door, and you will feel very wise." And then she said it. "But you've made one mistake. You've decided what we are without ever once watching what we do. You judged us by your fear, not by anything you saw. So I'll leave you with the only thing worth saying." She looked again directly across the chamber, at all of us, at me. "Watch closely." Then she picked up her plain dark coat, and she walked out, and the great doors of the Concord closed behind the last human who would stand in that room for 9 years. We told ourselves it was a bluff. Of course we did. What else could it be? She had no fleet in that chamber, no army. Earth had perhaps 40 warships to the Concord's 40,000. They were children, alone now, locked in their little system behind a cordon they themselves had promised not to challenge. Watch closely. It was theater, the last defiance of a defeated thing. I went back to my archives. I filed the record of the vote. I wrote in the slow, careful script of my people, Earth, membership struck, cordon established, matter closed. Matter closed. I have laughed at those 2 words so many times since that the laughter doesn't come anymore. For 3 years, nothing. The cordon held. A ring of Concord pickets at the edge of the Sol system, watching. Earth did exactly what Navarro had promised. They didn't fight it. Not one shot. The human ships pulled back inside their own border, and the door stayed shut, and the galaxy went on with its long, slow afternoon, and the fear we'd carried began slowly to fade. Because that's what fear does when nothing happens. It gets bored. It wanders off. The pickets reported strange things sometimes. Energy signatures we couldn't classify. Construction in the outer system, vast and fast, but vast and fast was just humans being humans, and they weren't crossing the line, so we noted it and filed it and didn't look too hard. A few of the younger Velith argued we should be paying closer attention. They were told the matter was closed. In the 4th year, the cordon stopped reporting strange things. It just stopped. The pickets still sent their routine all clears, but the strange signatures vanished. The outer system construction went dark. It was as if Earth had simply gone quiet, gone inward, accepted its exile, and turned its back on the stars entirely. And we fools, we read that as defeat, as withering, as the small dried-up death we'd predicted in that chamber. See, we told each other, they've given up. The math was right. That's how it stood when the silent engine woke. You have to understand what the silent engine was, or none of the rest will land. It was not ours. It was not anyone's, not anymore. It came from a war that ended before the Concord was born, a war between peoples whose names we don't even have, who burned each other so completely that all that's left of any of them are the weapons they built and lost. The galaxy is littered with such things. Dead engines, drifting graves. We map them, we mark them, we root around them, and we pray to whatever each of us prays to that they stay asleep. This one had been drifting for 11,000 years through the dark between 2 arms of nothing, and in the 4th year after we cast out Earth, its dead sensors brushed across the heat of a living star. The star was called Isulan. It was a Sephir world, my people's world, a colony of 9 million souls, blue oceans and white cities and the long, slow gardens we tend across whole lifetimes. My cousin line lived there. I had walked its shores as a youngling. When the first distress signal came through the relay and the word Isulan appeared in my archive feed, I felt something I had spent my entire long life learning not to feel. The engine woke, and it remembered what it was built to do. It was built to end worlds. Not quickly, that wasn't its design. It was built to dismantle, to take a populated system apart piece by piece, methodically, patiently, the way you'd take apart a machine you wanted to study. It came into the Isulan system and it began, with no malice and no mercy, simply executing an order 11,000 years old. And here is the thing that turned our blood to water. It could not be fought. The conquered sent a fleet. Of course we did. Isulan was ours, 9 million Sephir. We sent everything within reach. 300 warships under a Dravani admiral named Hesk, the finest we had. They arrived expecting to win. We always expected to win. 300 ships against one ancient hulk. The engine took them apart in an afternoon. Because it had been built by a people who fought wars we'd forgotten how to imagine. Our weapons were energy, beams, lances, the clean, elegant fire of a peaceful age. And the engine ate energy. It drank our beams. Every shot we fired, it folded into itself and threw back tenfold. Our shields meant nothing. It tuned its weapons to the exact frequency of each ship's defenses in the time it took to fire, like a thing reading your hand before you'd finished dealing the cards. Admiral Hesk lost 200 ships in the first hour. He pulled the rest back, regrouped, came in again from another angle with everything he had left. It didn't matter. There was no angle. The engine had fought 10,000 years of angles before the conquered existed. It knew them all. By the end of the day, of 300 ships, 11 remained and they were running. And the engine turned its slow attention back to Isulan and resumed taking the world apart. The evacuation began in panic. 9 million people, and lift capacity for maybe 2. The orbital habitats came apart one by one as the engine methodically severed them from the planet, and the transports that could still fly were overloaded, and the ones that couldn't sat on the ground while the cities above them came down in lines of fire across the night sky. I watched it from the archives. I watched the relay feed from Isulan with my 6 fingers pressed flat against the cold table, and I watched my own world dying in real time, and there was nothing that the great 9,000-year conquered could do. We had grown so wise, so patient, so careful never to feel too much, that when the moment came that demanded everything, we had nothing to give. We had built a civilization that could not bleed, and a thing that cannot bleed cannot fight for its own life. The conquered convened an emergency session. I was in that chamber again. I remember it was full of the same slow, careful faces, and not one of them had an answer, and the relay feed from Isulan played on the great screen above us, the cities falling, and we sat there, 9,000 years of wisdom, and we did nothing, because there was nothing in all our wisdom that fit the shape of this. And then a junior Velith at the comms tier stood up, and her voice cracked, and she said, "We're receiving a transmission from outside the system." The speaker asked, irritated, frightened, from whom? And she said, It's not in any conquered registry. It's an open broadcast, audio and visual. It's already going out to every world on the relay. We can't stop it, it's overriding the..." "From whom?" the speaker said again. And the screen above us, the screen showing Isulan dying, flickered and changed, and there was a face on it. A human face, older than I remembered, more gray in the dark hair, the same plain coat. Mara Navarro looked out at the entire conquered, at every world that had cast her people out, and she said 5 words. She said, "You told us to leave." The chamber went so silent, I could hear my own slow heart. "You closed the door, you said forever," a small breath, not anger, something heavier than anger. "We honored it. We didn't fire on your cordon. We didn't beg to be let back in. We went home and we got to work. And we waited because we knew this day would come. Not this exact day, but a day like it. A day when something woke up that your beautiful, careful, frightened little conquered couldn't stop." Behind her in the image I could see ships. Not 40, not the 40 warships we'd counted 4 years ago. The frame was filled with them, rank on rank, dark and strange and built to no design any of us had ever seen, stretching back beyond where the image could hold them. "You judged us," Navarro said, "without ever watching what we do. So." She leaned toward the lens, and for just a moment, across 9 years and the wreck of everything, I saw her eyes find the sapphire benches the way they had that last day. "Watch closely." And the screen cut back to Isulan, to the dying world, the falling cities, the great ancient engine turning in the dark, and into the upper edge of the frame, dropping out of the black with no warning and no fear, came the first of the human ships. HFY Yahan Main Part 1 Ka First Major Movement Rock Rahahun. Yet approx tilde 4, 800 words high tack. Yani Part 1 Key 89K Target Ka roughly half, no filler. Agla Chunk, Part 1 Kai second half, Main Ayaga. Human Fleet versus Silent Engine Ka actual confrontation. Human vs Galactic Soldiers Wally standoff beat. Jab Admiral Hes Ki Bakshkut ships humans P weapon Tan de Tehane, even as humans rescue Karn A Ra Hain. Isulan Kai evacuation, or Part 1 Ka Cliffed. Fur Part 2 main climax plus resolution plus ending line. Baz continue Part 1 Likta, main Uzi voice main seamlessly Aj Lajata Hun Jab Tak count target Tak Na Pahunch J. You said. Part 2 Part 210. 42 AM Claude responded. Thik High Adif, going straight into Part 2 orchestrated narrative continuation with climax, resolution and cinematic closure orchestrated narrative continuation with climax, resolution and cinematic closure Thik High Adif, going straight into Part 2. Same voice, Sapphire Archivist, seamless continuation from where the first human ship dropped into frame. Climax right arrow, the human versus galactic soldiers standoff, right arrow resolution, right arrow ending line. Inline as usual, no artifacts available in this chat. Part 2. The first ship came in low and fast, and it did not slow down. That was the thing none of us could process, sitting in that chamber with the feed playing above us. Every instinct 9,000 years had built into the Conquered said the same thing. You do not approach an active silent engine. You evacuate. You retreat. You mark the system as lost and you route around it for the next 10,000 years. Admiral Hesk had thrown 300 ships at it and kept his distance and still lost everything. That was the correct way to die to such a thing. From a respectful distance, the human ship flew straight at it. And it didn't fire. I remember a Kel delegate beside me making a sound. A click-click-click of pure confusion, because a warship that doesn't fire isn't a warship, it's a target. The engine registered the approach. We saw it on the feed, the great dark hulk shifting its attention, the way it had shifted toward Hesk's fleet, tuning itself, reading the ship's defenses to throw them back tenfold. The human ship had no energy shields for it to read. I want you to understand how strange that was to us. We had spent 9,000 years perfecting the elegant fire of a peaceful age, beams, lances, shields woven of light. The engine ate light. It drank energy. It was built to fight people like us, and the humans had flown into its system carrying almost no energy weapons at all. They came carrying mass. The first ship didn't fire a beam. It opened along its spine and through a column of solid metal slugs, dumb iron, each one the size of a Conquered shuttle, accelerated to a fraction of light speed by nothing but raw kinetic force. No energy signature for the engine to drink. No frequency to tune against. Just rock and iron and physics, the oldest weapon in the universe, the one we'd been too sophisticated to keep. The engine had no answer for it. It had forgotten this war the same way we had. It had spent 11,000 years fighting beings who fought with light, and it had no defense built for a thing that simply threw a mountain at it. The first salvo tore a wound in its flank, a city could have fallen into. The chamber made a sound I had never heard a Conquered chamber make. A gasp, 41 peoples gasping at once. And then the rest of the human fleet came down out of the dark. Not in formation, not in the clean geometric ranks our admirals loved. They came in a swarm, A storm, hundreds of ships of a dozen different builds, some sleek, some ugly, some that looked half-finished, thrown together fast because that's what they'd been doing, you understand, for 4 years behind the cordon in the dark. Not withering, not dying, building. They had taken our exile and they had used every day of it, and they had not built beautiful ships. They had built enough ships, and they had built them to do one thing. They surrounded the engine, and they hammered it with iron. But this is the part I have to tell carefully, because this is the part that I was wrong about, all the way through, and being wrong is harder to confess than being afraid. Admiral Hesk's 11 surviving ships were still in the system. They were running. They'd lost 289 ships, and they were broken and burning and limping toward the jump point, and Hesk himself was alive aboard the flagship, the Staven Reach, and when the human fleet poured into the system, Hesk did not see rescue. He saw an invasion. You have to understand his position. He just watched a single ancient horror destroy his fleet. He was half dead, his ship was bleeding atmosphere, and the people swarming into the system were the people the conquered had cast out forever, the people we all secretly believed would one day come back for revenge. And here they were, hundreds of strange ships, dropping into a Zephyr system unannounced, in the middle of a catastrophe. So Hesk turned his 11 dying ships around, and he aimed every weapon he had left at the humans. We saw it on the feed. We saw the targeting solutions light up. We watched a conquered admiral, surrounded by the wreck of his own fleet, point his guns not at the thing killing 9 million Zephyr, but at the thing trying to save them. And the humans saw it too. A human ship broke off from the swarm. Just one. It came about and put itself between Hesk's guns and the rest of the human fleet, Sidon, the broadest target it could make of itself, daring him, almost, and a voice came across the open channel, the same channel the whole conquered was watching on. It was not Navarro, it was younger, a man's voice tight fast. He said, "Conquered vessel Staven Reach. This is the human vessel Ojibwe. We see your guns. We're not going to fire on you. I say again, we are not going to fire on you." Hesk's voice came back and it shook, and I had never heard a Dravani voice shake. "You have no authorization to be in this system. You are in violation of the cordon. Stand down or be destroyed." And the human, I will remember this man's voice until the day I die, and I don't even know his name, the human laughed. Not cruelly, almost tenderly, the way you laugh at someone you've decided to forgive before they've even apologized. He said, "Admiral, with respect, you couldn't destroy that thing with 300 ships. You're not going to destroy us with 11, and we're not here for you." A pause. "There are evac transports on the surface that can't lift your people. We can reach them. Your ships can't. So you've got 2 choices. You can shoot us in the back while we go down there and pull your children off that rock and the whole galaxy is watching you do it. Or you can move." Silence on the channel. And then the human said, quieter, "We told you to watch closely, so watch. We're going to show you what we do." And the Ojibwe turned its broadside away from Hesk, turned its back on him, completely, undefended, the single most contemptuous and trusting thing I have ever seen one being do to another, and it dove toward the burning planet. Hesk did not fire. I have thought many times about what was in him in that moment. I think it was the deepest shame a soldier can feel. To be offered in front of the entire galaxy the chance to murder your own rescuers and to have to choose in front of everyone whether you are the thing they always feared you were. Hesk lowered his guns. The feed showed his 11 battered ships drift, purposeless, ashamed in the wreckage of their pride. And the human fleet went to work. I won't be able to do justice to what came next. The feed showed it in pieces, and even now the archive holds only pieces, because so much of it happened too fast and too far for any single lens. While part of the fleet held the engine, circling it, hammering it with iron, taking losses because they did take losses, dozens of human ships died in that ring, and I made myself watch everyone. While they held it, the rest went down to the surface. The transports that couldn't lift, the ones that had been sitting on the ground watching the sky fall, the ones full of people who had already said goodbye to the stars, the humans landed beside them. In the fire. They opened their holds and they didn't ask who was Sephir and who was Kel and who was anything. They just started pulling people aboard, fast, brutal, no ceremony, hands grabbing hands. And the feed caught one image that has never left me. A human crewman, helmet cracked, blood on his face, carrying a Sephir elder who could not walk, carrying her up a ramp on his own back while the city behind them came apart in light. A Sephir elder, my own people, the people who voted to throw his people away. He carried her like she was his own. They lifted 2 million off Isulan. They had said the conquered could only save 2, and that was with everything we had, and the conquered saved almost none, and the humans locked out, exiled, building in the dark for 4 years. They lifted 2 million human-cradled souls off a dying world while their own ships burned around them. It wasn't enough. 2 million out of 9. I will not lie to you and pretend it was a clean victory. 7 million Sephir died at Isulan, and nothing the humans did changed that, and they knew it, and you could hear it in their voices on the channel, the grief of people who'd come as fast as they could and still arrived too late for most. But 2 million is not none. 2 million is 2 million faces. 2 million who tend gardens now and tell their younglings about the day the ships came out of the dark. The engine did not die at Isulan. I should tell you that because the records will eventually. It was too vast to kill in one battle, but the humans wounded it badly, wounded it in a way 9,000 years of conquered wisdom had never managed, and more than that, they showed everyone how. Mass iron, the forgotten war. Within a year, the foundries of 41 peoples were building kinetic weapons again, relearning the oldest fight, and 3 years after Isulan, a combined fleet, human and conquered together, finally ran the silent engine down in the dark between the stars and broke it apart for good. But that's the easy ending, the clean one. That's not the one that matters. The one that matters happened back in the chamber. When the feed from Isulan finally went quiet, when the last transport lifted and the human fleet pulled back to tend its wounds, the conquered sat in that great room and could not speak. 41 peoples, 9,000 years, and not one of us could find a word. The screen still showed Navarro. She'd never cut the channel. She'd let it run the whole time, let us watch every second of what we'd cast out, doing what we were too wise and too careful and too afraid to do. The speaker rose, the same speaker who'd said forever. He was old even for a Sephir, and his hands shook, and he did not look wise anymore. He looked like what he was, an old man who had been very, very wrong. He said, "Envoy Navarro, the conquered," his voice failed him. He started again. "The conquered wishes to formally invite Earth and her peoples to rejoin." "No," she said. "Just that, no." The chamber flinched. "You misunderstand," Navarro said, and she was not cruel about it. That's the part that stayed with me. She was gentle, the way she'd been gentle that last day, and the gentleness was somehow the worst of it. "We didn't do this to get back in. We're not standing at your door asking to be let in from the cold." She shook her head slowly. "We did it because there were children on that rock who couldn't lift. That's all. That's the only reason there ever needs to be." She leaned toward the lens. "You spent 9,000 years learning how to never lose anything, and it made you into something that can't fight for the things it loves because you've trained yourselves not to love anything enough to fight. You looked at us, at how much we feel, how fast, how hard, how we'll burn our whole lives down for a stranger, and you called it a flaw. You called it volatile, destabilizing, imprudent, a breath. It's the only thing that came when Isulan screamed." Nobody moved. "So here's what we'll do," Navarro said. "We won't rejoin your conquered, but we'll never close our door the way you closed yours. When the next thing wakes up, and something always wakes up, call us. We'll come. We came this time and you'd cast us out forever." The smallest, saddest smile. "Imagine what we'd do for friends." And then she looked, one last time, directly at the Sephir benches. At me. I am certain of it now, the way I wasn't certain that first day. She found me, the archivist, the one who'd filed the vote, the one who'd written matter closed in his slow, careful hand. She said, "Tell your records I kept my word. I told you to watch closely." The channel cut. I am very old now, even for my kind. I have outlived the speaker and Admiral Hesk, who never forgave himself and asked to be buried at Isulan among the 7 million. And I have outlived, I think, Mara Navarro, because humans burn so bright and so brief. And 400 years is a long afternoon to us, but it was her whole and only life. I have spent the years since rewriting the archives. Not erasing, we don't erase. That's the one thing my people get right. I left the vote in. I left matter closed in my own hand, so that whoever comes after me will see exactly how wrong a wise people can be when they let their fear do their thinking. But I added to it. Every year I add to it. I have written down every name of every human who died in the ring around the engine that I could find. All of them. Because somebody in this Concord should know their names, and it might as well be the one who voted to throw them away. People come to the archive sometimes and ask me why I keep at it. An old Sephir, half blind now, 6 fingers gone slow, filling shelf after shelf with the deeds of a people who aren't even members. And I tell them the truth. I tell them that for 9,000 years we mistook the absence of feeling for wisdom, that we built a civilization that could not bleed and called it peace and very nearly died of it. And that one day a small woman in a plain coat stood in front of all of us and told us we judged a whole people without ever once watching what they do. And that she was right, and I was there, and I voted with the fearful, and I will spend whatever's left of my long, slow life making sure nobody forgets what came through the door we tried to close. She told us to watch closely. I'm still watching. I always will be.